So we continue our discussion. This is to reflect on the 30 years of democracy in South Africa. This as World Movement for Democracy South Africa and the Nelson Mandela Foundation co-host a panel discussion reflecting on 30 years of democracy this afternoon. So for more on this, we're going to be joined via video link by Adv Sipho Mantula from the Thabo Mbeki African School Public and International Affairs at Unisa. Adv Sipho, good afternoon and thanks for your time on the SABC at this hour.
Afternoon, Lizelle, and even to your viewers.
Let's look at the progress and the challenges that have been made in South Africa during its democratic transition. What are you observing in line with political dynamics, social dynamics, cultural dynamics, and even economic dynamics in this election year?
Lizelle, it has been a tough journey or a long road, or what the former president will have said, a long walk to freedom. Considering that from 1994, we had the first democratic elections. We had an economic plan, if you can recall, which I call it the rescue by Kwasatu to the ANC, coming with RDP. And from RDP, the era of Nelson Mandela, comes the era of the then President Thabo Mbeki with African Renaissance as part of our foreign policy. And moving from Thabo Mbeki to President Zuma now with Ubuntu, and to Kgalema Motlanthe and to President Ramaphosa. So if you look at the sixth administration and you look at that period of 1994 to 2024, there were serious hiccups and serious challenges in terms of leadership, also from provinces to local government. But one can say that maybe one of the progress that we have made is our presence in the African continent, our presence in the global affairs as the country that we are able to shake and shape global affairs. We're able to be part of the SADC, part of the OAU, which is AU now. But the challenges has been also how do we maintain what I will call participatory democracy, where young people are active to can engage in the elections, are able to engage into the politics, Lizelle, because you know that previous elections we were lamenting about the poor turnout of young people in the elections. And secondly, also we have a challenge also of a leadership deficit. How do we deal with the leadership deficit in the country? Culturally, social cohesion, I don't think, Lizelle, we have made it very well in terms of our relation, what others will call the race relation. Year after year, we have been finding pockets of racism, pockets of hate speech, issues of Afrophobia coming into the country. So one will say that it is a complex if we have to reflect, and it also goes with the active citizens. We should not assess the 30-year only through the eyes of the leaders or the parliament. I will assume that when we assess our 30-year review, let's start also with our contribution as the citizens. Contribution of the media also, Lizelle, how media has been capturing this journey of South Africa.
Well, thank you for setting that context, because as we navigate during this election year, we're looking at the ruling party's theoretical understanding of South Africa's current conditions. How would you say they're faring? Just as we also look at the rise of a new democracy, we're dealing with some real issues on the ground as well in relation to that.
No, correctly. But if you look at the ANC, how it has fared, one is to commend them that we never had a violent electoral process. Whenever there are elections in this country, we don't see violence that like in other African countries. And secondly, you might say that one of the benefits of the ANC, it is the one on access to education, that they've been pushing from basic education to higher education. Economically, I think we've been struggling. We've been borrowing money from IMF and the World Bank. And the case in point is what happened during the COVID-19. We had to go and borrow money, but we failed to improve our health infrastructure. And secondly, I think we failed on criminal justice system, Lizelle, because remember that we have been having many commissions, many high-level panels to deal with intelligence, to deal with the issues of the crime intelligence. So even on crime intelligence, criminal justice system, we have not done very well. And finally, one will say the Chapter 9 institution. For the past 30 years, we saw how one of the Chapter 9 institution, public protect are being removed from parliament. So you will understand also even the Chapter 9 institutions, we have not seen them being visible to many communities. And remember, Chapter 9s are what I call the bridge of building democracy, building participatory democracy in the country. And like I said earlier again, on race relation, I think the governing party has been struggling to pick up this international solidarity vis-a-vis national solidarity. How do we bring social cohesion both in public and private spaces? And that's where we are a bit struggling.
Well, speaking of which, I actually want to look at the domestic dynamics, just around the issues of public governance, even the exercise of public authority, and then the execution of policy, which, as we know, depends on a coherent political power that both manages and administers it. And so in lieu of that, in lieu of the challenges that you've now also alluded to, how does the ANC then begin to reform or to rehabilitate itself in this current era?
You know, Lizelle, I'm worried because you find that before the elective conference of the governing party, they have what they called NGC, or what they call National Policy Conference. One will have thought that the National Policy Conference will also translate into the state public policy. But we have a challenge. Even if you have a policy at the state level, you have legislation at the parliamentary level. The big question remains, do we have active participation of citizens to also be part of crafting the policy, crafting the legislation, so that when you go to implementation, you don't have to be worried or be struggling with the implementation? Because one thing that we are good at in this country is that we are good at having workshops, conferences, high-level meetings, but when it comes to implementation, so one looks at the reconfiguration of the state, as the President said in 2018, has not also paid dividends for us. The question of also having the policy implementations, it is also around the lack of state capacity. You might have been having many DGs, the chief directors, but they are also in acting capacity. So the issue that you raise also of authority, we have also the issue of acting capacities that don't have proper authority as permanent members to deal with the state policy challenges. So it is important in the state crafting of policy that you need to have permanent people who can implement the state policies, who are not politically inclined, but they are state inclined, because that's where we had a challenge that, one has what you call political allegiance to your governing party, but where is the allegiance to the state projects?
And so as we look at that, we have to also look back and learn in hindsight. What are your thoughts about the inherited privileges of white families who benefited under colonialism and apartheid 30 years into South Africa's democracy?
Absolutely. Actually, you are reminding me of what happened in the TRC. That did we even achieve anything from the TRC? Did we achieve community reparations? Did we transitional justice system that people were able to say, yes, this is what has happened? Inequality, it is still high. Remember, there was a point where there was a UN report talking about the levels of poverty in the sub-Sahara, and talking about even South Africa, that South Africa is having a challenge of even dealing with poverty, unemployment. I think the main challenge is that those who have benefited during apartheid days were also left off the hook. We never even prosecuted them. We never even had what we call, what the then chairperson of TRC, Desmond Tutu, the late, was talking about the wealth tax, to say that out of the TRC process, those who are wealthy and who have benefited after apartheid, they should have been charged to pay this wealth tax. So we never did that. Secondly, we had the challenge of having economy that was biased, having support from multinationals. We were relying on foreign investors rather than domestic investors. Even if you have domestic investors, we have turned them to become tenderpreneurs. Hence, we have the Zondo Commission report that was talking about how people captured the state using political influence. So one will look at that issue that you are raising of inequality, the issue of white people having benefited in this country. They've benefited unjustly. They've benefited also in the sense of using what you recall, it was called the black economic empowerment. At some point, we even said Chinese are black. They should benefit from the black economic empowerment, which was a facade that black people were the ones who suffered since 1652.
Advocate Sipho, it's actually unfair to reduce this conversation to such a short period of time, because there's obviously so much that's happened in our 30 years. I have come to the end at this point, but thank you very much for being part of this discussion. We're obviously going to continue to raise more questions and obviously explore a little bit further. For now, we'll leave that conversation there. Advocate Sipho Mantula is from the Thabo Mbeki African School Public and International Affairs at Unisa, really just chatting to us about 30 years of democracy in South Africa. This particularly comes to the focus as we look at elections that will be taking place this year, some of the strides that have been taken and the gaps that still remain, and what this new reality is going to look like with the rise of a new democracy 30 years in.